The sun was setting over New York City, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The streets buzzed with activity as people hurried to their destinations, some rushing home after a long day at work, others heading out for dinner or evening plans. Amidst this chaos, a young woman named Amina Johnson walked briskly down the sidewalk, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She had just finished her shift as a nursing assistant at a nearby hospital and was now on her way to catch the subway that would take her back to Brooklyn. Amina wasn't like most 24-year-olds. While many of her peers were exploring careers, traveling, or enjoying nights out with friends, she spent her days juggling 2 jobs to make ends meet. Her parents had passed away unexpectedly 5 years earlier, leaving her responsible for raising her younger siblings, 12-year-old Jamal and 9-year-old Layla. Though life hadn't been easy, Amina never complained. Instead, she worked tirelessly, determined to give her siblings the best future possible. As she approached the busy intersection near Central Park, Amina paused to check her phone. It was almost time for Jamal's soccer practice to end, and she wanted to remind him to grab something healthy to eat before coming home. Just as she tucked her phone back into her pocket, a loud screech pierced the air. Startled, she looked up to see an SUV speeding uncontrollably around the corner. Its tires squealed against the pavement and the driver seemed unable to regain control. Panic rippled through the crowd gathered at the crosswalk. People screamed and scattered, trying to get out of the vehicle's path. Amina froze for a split second, her heart pounding in her chest. Then her eyes locked onto the source of the commotion, a luxury sedan idling at the red light directly in the SUV's trajectory. Inside the car sat a well-dressed woman with a terrified expression, clutching her swollen belly. Pregnant. The realization hit Amina instantly. Without thinking twice, Amina sprang into action. Time seemed to slow down as adrenaline coursed through her veins. She sprinted across the street, dodging panicked pedestrians and honking cars. Her mind raced with questions. Could she reach the woman in time? What if the SUV hit them both? But there was no room for doubt. Someone needed help, and Amina couldn't stand by and do nothing. Reaching the passenger side of the sedan, Amina yanked open the door and grabbed the woman's arm. "You need to move," she shouted urgently. The woman, stunned and visibly shaken, struggled to unbuckle her seatbelt. With trembling hands, Amina helped her undo the latch and pulled her out of the car just as the SUV slammed into the passenger side with a deafening crash. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and the force of the impact sent both women tumbling to the ground. For a moment, everything went silent. Amina lay sprawled on the asphalt, dazed but conscious. Beside her, the pregnant woman groaned softly, clutching her stomach. Around them, the world slowly came back into focus. The blaring horns, the distant wail of approaching sirens, and the murmurs of bystanders gathering to see what had happened. "Are you okay?" Amina asked, struggling to sit up. Her body ached from the fall, but she forced herself to focus on the woman beside her. "Is the baby all right?" The woman nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. "I think so. Thank you," she whispered, hoarsely. "You saved us." Before Amina could respond, a man pushed his way through the growing crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed, he dropped to his knees beside the woman. His face was pale, his dark eyes wide with fear. "Evelyn!" he cried, pulling her into his arms. "Oh my God, Evelyn, are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Amina watched silently as the man, who she assumed was the woman's husband, held her close, his voice breaking with emotion. She felt a pang of relief knowing she'd done what she could to protect them. Still, her mind was foggy, and her body throbbed with pain. She tried to stand, but her legs felt shaky beneath her. "Wait," the man said suddenly, turning to look at Amina. His gaze swept over her disheveled appearance, the dirt smudged on her cheeks, the scrapes on her arms, and then softened with gratitude. You saved my wife. Who are you?" Amina hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I'm just someone who happened to be here," she stammered finally. "I'm glad I could help." The man stared at her for a long moment, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "No," he said firmly. "You're more than that. You're a hero." He reached out to shake her hand, but Amina instinctively pulled away, embarrassed by the attention. Heroes didn't exist in her world. They were characters in movies or stories told to inspire children. She was just a regular person doing what anyone else would have done in her situation. As paramedics arrived and began tending to Evelyn, the man introduced himself as Alexander Carter. Amina recognized the name immediately. Everyone in the city knew about the billionaire tech mogul whose innovations had revolutionized industries worldwide. Yet standing there in his tailored suit and polished shoes, Alexander didn't seem larger than life. He looked like any other husband desperate to ensure the safety of his family. "I don't know how to thank you," Alexander said earnestly, his voice thick with emotion. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, please, let me know." Amina shook her head, brushing off his offer. "It's fine," she replied softly. "Really, I'm just glad your wife and baby are safe." But Alexander wasn't satisfied. As the paramedics loaded Evelyn into an ambulance, he insisted on accompanying her to the hospital. Before leaving, he turned back to Amina one last time. "I'll find a way to repay you," he promised. "This isn't over." And with that, the ambulance sped away, leaving Amina alone amidst the wreckage. Exhausted and sore, she leaned against a lamppost, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of a few minutes, she had gone from being an ordinary woman walking home from work to someone who had risked her life to save a stranger's. Though she didn't realize it yet, this moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would change not only her life but also the lives of those around her. For now, however, Amina simply picked up her backpack and continued toward the subway station, eager to get home to her siblings. After all, there were still dishes to wash, homework to check, and dreams to chase, even if they felt impossibly far away. The days following the accident were a whirlwind for Amina. Between juggling her 2 jobs and caring for her siblings, she barely had time to process what had happened. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of that chaotic evening replayed. In her mind, the screeching tires, the terrified faces of strangers, and the weight of Evelyn's body as she pulled her from the car. Though she tried to brush it off as just another day in the life of someone who always lent a helping hand, deep down she knew this was different. She had saved a life, or rather 2 lives, and nothing could ever make that feel ordinary. Meanwhile, Alexander Carter couldn't stop thinking about the young woman who had risked everything to protect his family. He was used to being in control, accustomed to solving problems with money or power. But this was something else entirely. No amount of wealth could have changed the outcome of that night. It was Amina's courage and quick thinking that had spared Evelyn and their unborn child from tragedy, and now all he could think about was how to express his gratitude. Evelyn recovered quickly, thanks to the medical team at the hospital and the fact that Amina had acted so swiftly. The baby was healthy too, much to the relief of both parents. Yet despite the good news, Alexander felt restless. He couldn't shake the image of Amina standing there on the street, scratched, bruised, and humbly deflecting his thanks. There was something about her demeanor that struck him deeply. In her eyes he saw resilience, kindness, and an unspoken strength that made him want to know more about her. Determined to find her, Alexander enlisted the help of his assistant, who managed to track down Amina's address through the hospital records. When Alexander arrived at her small apartment building in Brooklyn a few days later, he wasn't sure what to expect. The neighborhood was modest but vibrant, filled with colorful murals and the sound of children playing outside. As he climbed the creaky stairs to her unit, he wondered if showing up unannounced might come across as intrusive. But then again, Amina wasn't like anyone else he'd ever met, and traditional rules didn't seem to apply here. Amina opened the door cautiously, surprised to see Alexander standing there. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and she wore an oversized sweater paired with sweatpants. Behind her, the faint smell of dinner wafted through the air, something hearty and comforting, like stew. "Mr. Carter?" she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" I wanted to check on you, Alexander replied, stepping inside after she gestured for him to enter. The apartment was cozy but cramped, with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with books and family photos. Two kids peeked out from behind a doorway, one boy with curious eyes and one girl clutching a stuffed animal tightly. They stared at Alexander wide-eyed before retreating into the next room. Are you okay? Alexander asked, turning his attention back to Amina. I've been worried about you. Amina shrugged, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm fine, she said simply. Just a few scrapes. Nothing serious. Alexander frowned. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take care of yourself. You saved my wife's life, and our baby's. I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything, Amina countered gently. I did what anyone would do. No, Alexander insisted, shaking his head. Not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have frozen or run the other way. But you ran toward danger without hesitation. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the depth of his emotions. I'll never forget that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, Amina broke it by asking, How's Evelyn? And the baby? They're both doing well, Alexander replied, managing a small smile. Evelyn keeps talking about you. How brave you were. How grateful she is. She wants to meet you, properly when she's feeling better. That's sweet, Amina said, though she sounded hesitant. Meeting Evelyn sounded nice in theory, but part of her worried about getting too involved. People like the Carters lived in a completely different world than hers. What could they possibly have in common? Sensing her unease, Alexander decided to change the subject. Tell me about your family, he said, gesturing toward the kids' room. Those must be your siblings? Amina nodded, visibly relaxing as she talked about Jamal and Layla. They're my whole world, she admitted. After our parents passed away, I promised myself I'd do whatever it takes to give them a good life. It hasn't been easy, but we manage. Alexander listened intently as she shared snippets of their daily routine, how Jamal loved soccer and dreamed of playing professionally someday, while Layla was obsessed with drawing and storytelling. He learned that Amina worked nights at a diner in addition to her shifts at the hospital, often sacrificing sleep to ensure her siblings had everything they needed. Despite the challenges, her love for them radiated clearly in every word she spoke. As the evening wore on, Alexander found himself opening up in ways he rarely did with others. He told Amina about his own childhood, growing up wealthy but emotionally distant from his parents who were more focused on business than family. He confessed that meeting her had made him reflect on his priorities and realize how much he still had to learn about compassion and selflessness. By the time he left, Alexander felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely connected to someone outside his usual circle of executives and socialites. And Amina, though initially wary of his intentions, began to see glimpses of vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. Maybe they weren't so different after all. Over the next few weeks, Alexander continued visiting Amina and her siblings, bringing groceries, toys, and even tickets to a local soccer game for Jamal. At first, Amina was reluctant to accept his generosity, fearing it might come with strings attached. But Alexander reassured her repeatedly that he simply wanted to help, not because he expected anything in return, but because he admired her spirit and wanted to support her journey. Their bond grew stronger with each visit. Evelyn joined them, once she was fully recovered, instantly forming a connection with Amina. The two women spent hours chatting about everything from parenting to dreams they hoped to achieve. Evelyn marveled at Amina's determination and encouraged her to pursue her aspirations, whatever they might be. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park watching Jamal play soccer, Evelyn turned to Amina and said, "You inspire me, you know. After everything you've been through, you still find a way to keep going. That's incredible." Amina smiled shyly, brushing off the compliment. "I just do what I have to do," she replied, We all have our battles to fight. Yes, Evelyn agreed. But not everyone fights them with such grace and strength. You remind me that no matter how hard things get, there's always hope. It was in moments like these that Amina realized the impact she had on others, not just through her actions but through her presence. She hadn't set out to change anyone's life, yet here she was, touching hearts and inspiring those around her. Even Alexander, who had once seemed untouchable in his world of privilege, was learning to see life through a new lens because of her. Though Amina still doubted whether she belonged in their world, she couldn't deny the warmth and sincerity she felt whenever she was with the Carters. They weren't just clients or acquaintances, they were becoming friends. And as unlikely as it seemed, their friendship was proving to be one of the most meaningful relationships she'd ever had. Little did Amina know, however, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her limits, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately lead her to discover the true extent of her potential. For now, though, she cherished these moments of connection, finding solace in the knowledge that even in the toughest times, humanity had a way of bringing people together. Amina's life began to shift in subtle yet profound ways after her bond with the Carters deepened. Though she still worked long hours and juggled responsibilities, there was a new sense of lightness in her days. It wasn't just the material support Alexander had offered, groceries, school supplies for Jamal and Layla, or even the occasional gift card. It was the emotional connection she felt with them. Evelyn became like an older sister, always checking in on her and offering advice when Amina needed it most. And Alexander? Well, Alexander was different now. He wasn't the distant billionaire she'd first encountered at the accident scene. Instead, he seemed more human, more grounded, as if meeting Amina had cracked open a part of him that had been hidden for years. One crisp autumn evening, Alexander invited Amina and her siblings over for dinner at his penthouse apartment. The idea made Amina nervous. She hadn't spent much time in places like this, luxurious spaces where every detail screamed wealth and privilege. But Alexander insisted, saying it was just a casual meal and that Evelyn would love to see them again. Reluctantly, Amina agreed, reminding herself that the Carters weren't trying to show off. They genuinely cared about her and her family. When they arrived, the view from the penthouse took Amina's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline of Manhattan, and the warm glow of chandeliers lit up the spacious living area. Layla clung to Amina's hand, wide-eyed and awestruck, while Jamal wandered around inspecting everything with the curiosity of a budding explorer. Evelyn greeted them warmly, hugging each of them as if they were old friends. Alexander stood, nearby, smiling softly, clearly pleased to see how comfortable everyone seemed. Dinner was delicious, a mix of home-cooked dishes prepared by a private chef, and conversation flowed easily. Evelyn talked about her pregnancy updates, joking about how she craved pickles and ice cream late at night. Jamal shared stories about his soccer team, earning laughs when he described scoring the winning goal during his last game. Layla shyly showed Evelyn some of her drawings, which earned enthusiastic praise from both Evelyn and Alexander. As dessert was served, the mood shifted slightly. Amina noticed Alexander glancing at her several times, as if he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to bring it up. Finally, after a lull in the conversation, he cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Amina," he began, his tone serious but kind. "I've been thinking a lot lately about what you've done for us, for my family, and I can't stop wondering, is there anything we can do for you? Anything at all?" Amina froze, caught off guard by the question. She hadn't expected this moment, though she should have known it was coming. Alexander had asked similar questions before, but she'd always brushed them off, insisting she didn't need anything. This time, however, something inside her stirred. Maybe it was the warmth of the evening, the laughter of her siblings, or the genuine sincerity in Alexander's voice. Whatever it was, she found herself hesitating. I don't know," she stammered finally, looking down at her hands. "You've already done so much for me and my family." "That's not what I'm asking," Alexander said gently. "I'm talking about you. What do you want? What makes you happy? The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Amina. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if everyone could see straight into her soul. For years, she'd pushed aside her own dreams and desires, focusing solely on survival and providing for Jamal and Layla. But now, sitting here surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, those buried aspirations began to surface. Taking a deep breath, Amina spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. "There's something I've always wanted to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of becoming a doctor. Helping people, it's what I've always been passionate about, but—" Her voice trailed off and she shook her head as if dismissing the thought before it fully formed. "But what?" Evelyn prompted softly, leaning closer. "Why haven't you pursued it?" "Because life got in the way," Amina replied, shrugging as if it were no big deal. "After my parents passed away, I had to focus on taking care of Jamal and Layla. There wasn't time or money for college. And now—" She glanced at her siblings, who were quietly listening to the conversation. "Now I'm stuck working. 2 jobs just to keep things running. Going back to school feels impossible." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Evelyn reached out and squeezed Amina's hand, her eyes glistening with tears. Even Jamal and Layla looked somber, as if realizing for the first time how much their sister sacrificed for them. Alexander sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but laced with emotion. "Impossible isn't a word I accept," he said firmly. "Not when it comes to someone like you." Amina blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said," Alexander replied, leaning forward again. "If your dream is to become a doctor, then let me help you make that happen. You saved my wife's life. You saved our baby's life. If anyone deserves a chance to chase their dreams, it's you." Tears welled up in Amina's eyes and she quickly looked away, embarrassed by the sudden rush of emotion. I couldn't ask you to do that," she murmured. "It's too much." "You're not asking," Alexander countered. "I'm offering. And trust me, it's not charity. It's an investment. In you, in your future, and in the countless lives you'll touch once you achieve your goals." Evelyn nodded in agreement. "Think about it, Amina. Imagine being able to help people on an even bigger scale. As a doctor, you could save so many more lives. Isn't that worth fighting for?" Amina didn't answer right away. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, the idea of pursuing her dream felt exhilarating, like stepping into a world she'd only dared to imagine. On the other hand, accepting such generosity felt overwhelming. What if she failed? What if she couldn't live up to their expectations? Seeing the hesitation in her eyes, Alexander added, "And it's not just about funding your education. We'll figure out childcare for Jamal and Layla so you can focus on your studies. You won't have to worry about balancing work and school. All you'll need to do is believe in yourself." At that moment, Amina realized something important. These weren't empty promises. Alexander and Evelyn truly believed in her, perhaps more than she believed in herself. They saw potential in her that she had long forgotten existed, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop doubting and start trusting. Not just in them, but in herself. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. "Thank you for believing in me." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and light-hearted chatter, but Amina's mind kept returning to the conversation. That night, as she tucked Jamal and Layla into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was standing on the edge of something monumental. Becoming a doctor had always been a distant dream, something she whispered to herself in quiet moments but never truly believed could come true. Now, thanks to the Carters' unwavering support, it felt within reach. As she drifted off to sleep, Amina allowed herself to dream, not just of medical school or white coats, but of a future where she could give back to the world in ways she'd never imagined. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful. hopeful that her sacrifices wouldn't define her forever, hopeful that her hard work would pay off, and hopeful that someday she'd be able to look back on this moment and know it was the turning point that changed everything. With the Carters' unwavering support, Amina's life began to transform in ways she had once thought impossible. The journey wasn't easy, far from it, but every challenge only strengthened her resolve. Alexander and Evelyn didn't just offer financial assistance. They became pillars of encouragement, cheering her on through late-night study sessions, grueling exams, and moments of self-doubt. They helped her enroll in pre-med courses at a local community college, ensuring she had access to tutoring and resources while juggling her responsibilities at home. At first, balancing schoolwork with caring for Jamal and Layla felt overwhelming. Amina often stayed up until the early hours of the morning reviewing biology notes or practicing chemistry equations, only to wake up a few hours later to make breakfast for her siblings before heading off to work. But slowly, things started falling into place. With childcare arranged by the Cartins, Amina found pockets of time she hadn't realized existed. She learned to manage her schedule more efficiently, dedicating specific blocks of time to studying, working, and spending quality moments with Jamal and Layla. Evelyn played a particularly special role during this period. She visited Amina regularly, bringing over homemade meals or snacks to keep her fueled during marathon study sessions. More importantly, she became a mentor and confidant, sharing stories about her own struggles as a young woman navigating adulthood. "You're stronger than you think," Evelyn would say whenever Amina doubted herself. "And remember, we're here for you every step of the way." Alexander, too, remained deeply invested in Amina's progress. He checked in frequently, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely cared. One evening, after attending one of Jamal's soccer games, Alexander pulled Amina aside. "How are classes going?" he asked, his tone warm yet curious. "They're tough," Amina admitted, smiling faintly. "But I'm keeping up. It's been a long time since I've studied like this, so it's taking some adjustment." "Well, you're doing incredible," Alexander replied firmly. "I read your midterm report. You aced organic chemistry. That's no small feat." Amina blushed, brushing off the compliment. "It's just one class. There's still so much more to learn." "And you will," Alexander said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember why you're doing this. Not just for yourself, but for everyone whose lives you'll touch someday." His words stuck with Amina long after their conversation ended. For years, she had lived solely for others, her siblings, her patients, even strangers in need. Now, for the first time, she was learning to dream for herself without guilt. Becoming a doctor wasn't just about achieving personal success. It was about creating a ripple effect of kindness and healing that could extend far beyond her immediate circle. As the months turned into years, Amina's hard work began paying off. Her grades were stellar, earning her recognition from professors and peers alike. When the time came to apply to medical schools, Alexander helped her craft a compelling application, highlighting not only her academic achievements, but also her resilience and dedication to serving others. To Amina's astonishment, she received acceptance letters from several prestigious institutions, including Columbia University, a dream she had once dismissed as unattainable. The day she opened her acceptance letter, tears streamed down her face. She called Alexander immediately, her voice trembling with emotion. "I got in," she whispered. "Columbia. I actually got in." On the other end of the line, Alexander laughed, a sound full of pride and joy. "Of course you did," he said. "I never doubted you for a second." That night, the Carters threw a celebration at their penthouse. Evelyn decorated the space with balloons and streamers, turning the sleek apartment into a festive haven. Jamal and Layla beamed with pride as guests toasted to Amina's accomplishments. Even Evelyn, now 8 months pregnant with her second child, insisted on giving a heartfelt speech. "Amina is proof that anything is possible if you have the courage to chase your dreams," Evelyn said, raising her glass. "She inspires us all to be better, to do better. Here's to Dr. Amina Johnson, future healer and hero." The room erupted in applause, and Amina stood there, overwhelmed by gratitude. Looking around at the people who had supported her, the Carters, her siblings, friends, and mentors, she realized how far she'd come. This wasn't just her victory, it was theirs too. Together, they had built a foundation of hope and determination that had carried her through the toughest days. Medical school proved to be even more challenging than Amina had anticipated. The coursework was intense, the clinical rotations exhausting, and the emotional toll of dealing with real patients weighed heavily on her. Yet she persevered, drawing strength from the lessons she'd learned throughout her life. Every late-night shift at the hospital reminded her of her roots in nursing. Every interaction with a patient reinforced her belief in the power of compassion and empathy. During her third year of med school, Amina chose to specialize in obstetrics and gynecology, a decision inspired by Evelyn. "You saved my life," Evelyn had told her once. "Now imagine saving hundreds or thousands of mothers and babies. That's what OBGYNs do." The idea resonated deeply with Amina. Helping women bring new life into the world felt like the ultimate act of service, combining her love for medicine with her passion for supporting others. As she progressed through her training, she excelled, impressing her instructors with her sharp mind and gentle bedside manner. Patients often remarked on how comfortable they felt under her care, praising her ability to listen and connect on a human level. Meanwhile, Alexander underwent his own transformation. Inspired by Amina's journey, he began reevaluating his priorities. For years, he had poured his energy into building his empire, chasing success at the expense of personal fulfillment. But watching Amina pursue her dreams with such authenticity and purpose made him realize there was more to life than wealth and accolades. He started channeling his resources toward initiatives that uplifted underserved communities, funding scholarships for aspiring healthcare professionals, and launching programs aimed at improving maternal health outcomes. One afternoon, as Amina prepared for her final exams, Alexander stopped by her apartment with an unexpected gift, a framed photo of the two of them taken on the night of her acceptance to Columbia. Beneath the picture, he had inscribed a short message. "To Amina, whose courage changed my life as much as it changed hers." Tears welled up in Amina's eyes as she read the inscription. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, hugging him tightly. "Thank you for everything." "You don't need to thank me," Alexander replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You've already given me more than I ever gave you. You showed me what truly matters." By the time Amina graduated from medical school, she had become a symbol of resilience and hope, not just for her family and the Carters, but for everyone who crossed her path. At her graduation ceremony, as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she scanned the crowd for familiar faces. There they were, Jamal and Layla, clapping enthusiastically, Evelyn glowing despite her advanced pregnancy, and Alexander, wiping away tears of pride. In that moment, Amina knew she wasn't alone. She had built a family, not just of blood, but of hearts united by love, trust, and shared dreams. And as she stepped forward into her new role as Dr. Amina Johnson, she carried with her the knowledge that no matter how daunting the road ahead might seem, she would always have a village behind her, cheering her on. Years passed, and Dr. Amina Johnson became a name synonymous with compassion, excellence, and unwavering dedication. Her journey from a struggling nursing assistant to a respected obstetrician was nothing short of extraordinary. But it wasn't the accolades or recognition that defined her success. It was the lives she touched along the way. Every patient who walked into her care left feeling seen, heard, and valued. She carried with her the lessons she'd learned from her own life: resilience in the face of adversity, kindness as a guiding principle, and gratitude for every opportunity. 1. Crisp spring morning, Amina stood outside the hospital where she now worked, taking a deep breath before heading inside. Today was special, not just because it marked another day of delivering babies and caring for mothers, but because Evelyn Carter was scheduled to give birth to her second child. The irony wasn't lost on Amina. Years earlier, she had saved Evelyn's life during that chaotic accident. Now she would guide her through one of life's most miraculous moments. As she entered the maternity ward, Amina felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Delivering any baby was a profound responsibility, but this delivery carried extra weight. Evelyn had chosen Amina as her doctor not out of obligation, but because she trusted her completely. Who better to bring my baby into the world than the woman who helped save it? Evelyn had joked during one of their prenatal visits. When Amina stepped into Evelyn's room, she found her surrounded by loved ones. Alexander holding her hand, Jamal and Layla sitting quietly nearby, and even Alexander's mother, who had flown in from Europe for the occasion. Despite the bustling energy in the room, Evelyn's calm demeanor put everyone at ease. "You ready for this?" Amina asked with a warm smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Evelyn replied, squeezing Alexander's hand. "As long as you're here, I know everything will be okay." The labor process was long but steady, with Amina guiding Evelyn through, each contraction with patience and encouragement. Hours later, when the moment finally arrived, Amina positioned herself at the foot of the bed, her focus sharp yet gentle. "Okay, Evelyn, one more big push," she instructed, her voice steady. With a final effort, Evelyn pushed, and seconds later the room filled with the sound of a newborn's cry. Amina carefully lifted the tiny, wriggling bundle and placed her in Evelyn's arms. "It's a girl," she announced softly, her own eyes glistening with tears. Evelyn cradled her daughter, overcome with emotion, while Alexander leaned over, kissing both his wife and their new baby. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice breaking. Amina stepped back, giving the family space to bond, though her heart swelled with pride. This was why she had fought so hard to become a doctor, to witness moments like these, where life began anew and love overflowed. As she watched Evelyn and Alexander marvel at their daughter, she couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd all come since that fateful night years ago. After ensuring mother and baby were stable, Amina excused herself briefly to update the rest of the team. When she returned, Alexander pulled her aside. His expression was a mix of awe and gratitude, and his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given us the greatest gift imaginable." Amina shook her head, smiling softly. "You already repaid me by believing in me when no one else did," she reminded him. "This is what I was meant to do." But Alexander wasn't satisfied. Over the next few weeks, as Evelyn recovered and adjusted to life with a newborn, he continued to think about ways to honor Amina's contributions, not just to his family, but to countless others. He realized that her impact extended far beyond the walls of the hospital. Through her work, she inspired hope and patience, mentored young medical professionals, and championed causes that aligned with her values. Determined to create something lasting in her name, Alexander approached Amina with an idea. "What if we started a foundation together?" he suggested one evening over dinner. "Something focused on supporting underprivileged women pursuing careers in medicine. We could call it the Amina Initiative." Amina stared at him, stunned. "You want to name it after me?" "Why not?" Alexander replied. "You're the reason this idea exists. Your story proves that with the right support, anyone can achieve greatness. Imagine how many lives we could change by helping other women follow in your footsteps." Though flattered, Amina hesitated. "It sounds amazing, but are you sure? There's so much work involved." "I'm sure," Alexander said firmly. "And besides, you won't be doing it alone. Evelyn and I will handle the logistics. You focus on being the heart and soul of the project." With their combined efforts, the Amina Initiative quickly gained momentum. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and childcare assistance for women pursuing degrees in healthcare fields. Within its first year, dozens of aspiring doctors, nurses, and midwives received funding and guidance, allowing them to chase their dreams without sacrificing their families or financial stability. For Amina, the foundation represented more than just a charitable endeavor. It was a testament to the power of community and collaboration. Knowing that she was helping pave the way for future generations filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't known before. and seeing the joy on recipients' faces reminded her of her own journey, the late nights, the sacrifices, and the people who had believed in her when she doubted herself. Meanwhile, Amina's relationship with the Carters grew stronger with each passing year. They weren't just benefactors or friends, they were family. Jamal and Layla, now teenagers, adored spending time with Alexander and Evelyn, often referring to them as Uncle Alex and Aunt Evie. Layla, in particular, had developed a passion for art, thanks in part to Evelyn's encouragement, while Jamal continued to excel in soccer, earning a spot on his high school varsity team. On weekends, the two families often gathered for meals or outings, creating memories that bridged their worlds. Whether it was celebrating birthdays, holidays, or milestones, they shared laughter, stories, and dreams for the future. For Amina, these moments were reminders of how interconnected their lives had become and how much richer they were because of it. One summer evening, as the group sat together on the Carters' rooftop terrace, watching the sunset, Alexander raised a glass. "To family," he said, his gaze sweeping over everyone present. Not the kind defined by blood, but the kind forged through love, trust, and shared experiences. "To family," the others echoed, clinking their glasses together. As the sky turned shades of gold and pink, Amina looked around at the people who had shaped her life in ways she never could have imagined. From the chaos of that near-tragic accident to the triumphs of today, every step of her journey had led her here, to a place where she belonged, surrounded by those who cherished her. In that moment, Amina understood something profound. Life wasn't about avoiding hardships or striving for perfection. It was about finding meaning in the struggles, building bridges where none existed, and lifting others up along the way. She had started as a young woman simply trying to survive, but through acts of courage, kindness, and determination, she had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone she touched. And as she sipped her drink, basking in the warmth of friendship and belonging, Amina knew one thing for certain: her story was still being written. But whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength and grace that had brought her this far.